Well, hello, and welcome to another video about electric Raleigh choppers. This time I'm featuring my latest build. And during this video I'm going to show you some of the design and decision processes that I go through when I'm building these bikes. This bike, for instance, has been resprayed a silver metallic colour, but that wasn't my original intention, so let me take you back to the start of the build and I'll explain. So this is the bike frame, stripped down and ready for all the preparation work that I will have to put into it before I paint it. It's a really nice bright blue colour. However, if you look closely you'll find there are a lot of scratches and dings in it, and so it's not really salvageable in its current condition. Also, the previous owner resprayed the front forks a similar but different shade of blue, so there's no way I could leave these. So I'm going to respray this bike. Now, my intention was to strip the bike down to the alloy frame and polish it to give it a chrome-like appearance. However, having taken some of the paint off, I realised that's not going to be so easy and it's going to be very time consuming. So I did a test area with paint stripper and it took me quite a while just to get it down to this state. If you look closely you can see there's still primer here and you can just about see some of the alloy frame underneath, but it would take me many hours to get the whole frame down to pure alloy, and I don't think the condition of the metal underneath would allow me to polish it to an acceptable level. So as with everything in life, you have to have a plan B. My plan is to respray this bike using a bright metallic silver colour and applying lots of coats of lacquer on it to make it stand out. Now, whilst we're looking at this frame, there's a few things I wanted to say about it. First of all, how incredibly light it is, because unlike the original choppers, these frames are made of aluminium alloy. And the weight saving is useful for when you're building an electric bike, because adding a motor and a battery will add about 5 kilograms. So offsetting that with a lighter frame is a good idea. The other thing that's come to light is that this diameter here of the bottom bracket is crucial if you want to fit a mid-drive electric motor. And the earlier bikes, the Mark 1s and Mark 2s, have a smaller bottom bracket. So essentially a Mark 3 chopper is the only version that you can fit a mid-drive electric motor to. Now, not only does having an aluminium alloy frame make the bike light, it also means we don't have to worry about rust on these bikes. Some of the original bikes have big problems whereby sissy bars are seized in this section of the frame here, and frames can sometimes be destroyed in the process of extracting a sissy bar. That's not a case with a Mark III chopper. You do sometimes see cracks in these areas, but I've not come across it on any of the bikes I've had. I've now completed the respray of the bike. There are 3 stages to the paint process. Primer. In this case I've chosen to use a white primer as it lightens up the paintwork as opposed to the normal grey primer. The base colour is a flaky metallic silver, and then on top of that I've put about 6 or 7 coats of lacquer, and after leaving it to harden for a few days I can then polish it. The reason I do that is because, whilst this is not bad for a rattle can finish, I know it can be significantly improved with polishing. Having tried various polishes and cutting compounds, I find this one works really well for me. It cuts through efficiently and it leaves a really clean, glossy mirror finish. So I spent a few minutes polishing this chain guard, and I think you can see here just how reflective it is. It's almost like a mirror. So not only do you get a nice shiny reflective surface, it also helps to bring out the metal flake, and I'm looking forward to seeing this on the completed bike on a sunny day with the reflections and the effect that that will give. All I have to do now is polish the rest of the bike up to this standard. When it comes to applying the decals, you only get one shot at this job. There's no way you're going to be able to reposition these decals without damaging the decal itself and potentially the paint surface underneath. So you need to be really sure beforehand exactly where you're going to position this. Particularly on a prominent part of the bike as this, if this were badly aligned, it would stand out a mile and ruin the overall look of the bike. So make sure you know where you're going, make sure what you're lining it up to. So this edge of the chain guard is critical for alignment of these lines, and obviously there's a front back positioning, and I've decided that I want those two black dots to align. That gives me a reference. Now, the final phase of applying the decal is to remove this top layer. And again, this can present challenges, so I tend to keep a sharp knife like this handy because it can sometimes lift elements of the decals, specifically these small letters. So you just need to take your time and pull gently. I'm now ready to fit the battery to the bike. This is a cardboard mock-up of the most common type of battery that you will find if you search for an electric bike battery online. And it's designed to be fitted to the down tube of a conventional bike. Most down tubes on conventional bikes have two threaded inserts, and this picks up on those, making it really quick and easy to install. Now, unfortunately, on a chopper, A, we don't have any threaded inserts on the down tube here, and B, there's no way a battery of this size is ever going to fit within the frame. Now, if you're just taking a standard Mark III chopper and fitting a motor and battery, then you won't have this gear shifter. So this position here in front of the seat is the most logical position to fit a battery, and it will be relatively simple for you to install and engineer that. Because I fitted a Mark II seat and sissy bar, I have to think about installing a battery somewhere in this area here. Now, if you've looked at some of my other videos, you'll see I have fitted batteries underneath the seat here. That does require a certain amount of engineering and manufacturing some form of support to attach it to the base of the seat, but that's quite a neat installation and I quite like that. I've also considered whether or not you could fit a battery here, but unfortunately this type of battery is just simply slightly too large to fit between the sissy bar springs, so unfortunately that can't fit in there, otherwise it could look quite good. So if you're using a battery of this type, it's going to have to sit somewhere on the back. Now you could attach it perhaps possibly to the back plate of the seat or to the sissy bar. I have seen some people even put a backpack over the sissy bar and just fit it on that, which is a quick and simple solution. For this bike, I'm going to revert to a battery type that I used on my very first electric chopper. I've put a link to the video of that ultraviolet bike in the description below so you can see how it was mounted. This battery was designed to fit inside the frame of a folding electric bike. And when I was playing around with it, I also noticed that it would fit quite nicely on the sissy bar here at the back. And it was that realization that made me think about creating my first electric chopper. Now on this bike, I'm going to take a different approach. As I mentioned earlier, I've wondered whether or not you could fit a battery in this location here. So I'm going to have a go with this. I'm going to create some bracketry to attach it to the frame and the rack. And I think it could look quite neat, and also it'll be good because the centre of gravity will also be lower in here. So I'm going to go away and do some fettling and create the metalwork to build this onto the bike. I live in a busy suburban setting, so I always think it's a good idea to fit a bell and a light on my project bikes. The Bafang motor kits always include these LED lights. And they're really handy because they take their power from the main battery, so you don't need any additional batteries or power source. And they're controlled from a button on the controller on the handlebar, so they're really easy to use. But I don't like this modern black plastic housing, so what I like to do is to take the LED out of this and fit it in an older style light, such as this Sturmey Archer one here. Now before I go any further, just a word of warning. Despite their tiny size, these LEDs are insanely bright. So whatever you do, if you're playing around with this and you've got power on it, don't look directly. In fact, I recommend if you are doing any testing with this, you wear protective eyewear to shield your eyes. It's fairly straightforward to mount it on this Sturmey Archer light. All I have to do is glue it to the back of the reflector there, and that actually will disperse the light quite nicely. All I got to do then is reassemble this, attach this back to the cable on the bike, and that's another job done. This is my fifth electric chopper. As with all the others, it's based on a Mark III bike. These bikes were produced between 2004 and 2012. And within the chopper fan-based community, they tend to be looked down upon. And I can sort of understand that because they were built down to a price and had to conform to the standards at the time for the lowest possible cost. So it's inevitable that items such as the gear shifter and the long seat just had to go. However, it's the sissy bar treatment that I find most troubling. It's the fact that they attach springs that have no function whatsoever. And I think that's such a shame, and as an engineer I find that very frustrating. But also as a clear indication of just how penny pinching they were, they replaced the big bold reflector on the rear with this rather smaller one. And I think, again, that devalued the appeal of the bike substantially. Now, having said all of that, I have to say I do actually quite like Mark III choppers because they have certain redeeming features. Firstly, They're the lowest cost way of getting into choppers. And you can pick up a decent Mark III chopper for £200 or £300 quite easily these days. Now, if you're new to choppers or you're returning after a long time and you're wondering if the bikes are right for you, it's far better just to spend a few £100 on a Mark III rather than blow £1,000, £2,000 or more on an earlier bike. And maybe you discover at the end of that you're not as smitten with them and they're not perhaps right for you. I've already mentioned that the frame is lighter because it's alloy and it doesn't suffer from rust. That's also the same for the wheel rims. Now, I ride these bikes quite a bit, which means you inevitably ride through puddles and mud, and so here is a compromise that I'm happy with. These aren't as pretty or shiny as the chrome original wheels, but if I get them dirty, they only require a wash down at the end of the journey, and therefore I'm happy to trade having less bling for easier maintenance. The other thing is the brakes are far superior on Mark III's because A, the brake pads are larger, and B, they have these fine adjustments that you get on more modern brakes. And if you take the time to set them up correctly, you can ensure maximum contact between the pad and the rim. And when they are set up correctly, these are really grippy brakes. And that's essential on an electric chopper because you will be travelling at faster speeds on a bike like this. And the final point is an aesthetic one. I prefer the larger diameter down tube that's fitted to a Mark III. I guess Raleigh had to make it larger because alloy isn't as strong as steel. But at 60mm high, it's precisely the same height as the Mark II chain guard that are fitted here. So put together in this configuration, you get much cleaner lines to the frame. And if you look back at Tom Carron's original sketches, you will see there is a strong similarity between this configuration and some of the ideas that he drew way back in 1968. When it comes to choosing the paint colour for my projects, I'm usually inspired by bikes that I see online, and I've seen quite a few silver and chrome bikes recently, and that's why it's this colour. Now once you've chosen the paint colour, of course, then you need to choose the colour of decals to go with that paint scheme. And over the years Raleigh have used colours such as orange and yellow with their silver and chrome bikes, but they never quite worked for me. And the bike that I saw that I really liked was the special edition SE bike of the mid 1970s, and that's because the decals on those bikes were black and silver grey. So I like that monochrome colour scheme, and that's what we have here, a modern interpretation of that. I did wonder how well silver decals and silver paint would work, but because it's a mirror chrome with a black outline on a flake silver, then that actually works really well and it stands out beautifully. Not only do I like to try different colours on each of my builds, I also like to experiment with some of the technical features. And as you've seen on this bike, I've installed the battery in a different location this time. And whilst it may be not quite as neat an installation as the earlier bikes, it has one advantage, and that is that it can be easily removed. So whenever I'm taking my bike out somewhere and I need to load it in the boot of a car, it's just that bit lighter and easier to handle. The other thing that's different about this bike is the rear light. Yes, it's a rear light and not a reflector. I've always thought that if Raleigh could have afforded to, they would have fitted a light on the rear of the chopper, but as it was already quite an expensive bike, they sought a cheaper alternative, and that's why it got a reflector. Now that got me thinking, what if you could backlight that reflector? So I took a standard reflector like this one and I cut the back of it, and then using a product called Veraboard, I created this array of red LEDs, and the theory is that the lights shine through. However, the moulding in the plastic of the reflector, the pattern that's in there, obscures most of the light, so it's not very effective, unfortunately. So then I thought, well, can I find a round light that's a similar size to the reflector? And fortunately, Eveready made this one, and to the millimetre it's the same size as the reflector, and it fits really nicely there. Now, just like the front light, this has an LED in it powered from the main battery. The difference being that it has two modes of operation. It can be on permanently, but it can also operate as a brake light. Now, I've never seen a brake light on a bike before, let alone a chopper. So it'll be interesting to see people's reactions next time I take this bike to a chopper meet, and to see people's amusement or whatever conversation it might stimulate. Now, there's no getting away from the fact that I'm a 6-foot bloke riding a bike that was originally intended for kids. However, if you look at the publicity material used by Raleigh to promote their recent Mark IV chopper, you'll see all the images contain exclusively adults. So does that mean that Raleigh now consider the chopper to be a bike for adults? Whatever your opinion on that, I maintain that with the correct modifications, these bikes can be made a safe, comfortable ride for someone like me. This bike originally came with a conventional seat that restricted the riding position to about here. The longer Mark II seat allows you to sit further back on the bike, providing more arm and leg room. And that's further enhanced by this slightly taller seat post that I've fitted. This bike also has a Mark II sissy bar and spring, and therefore a functioning rear suspension. And if you look closely at me riding these bikes in my videos, you'll see these springs compressing and doing their job of absorbing the shocks as I go over bumps. This particular bike also has an extra layer of foam to make it even more comfortable. Up front, there's bags of scope for adjustment for height and reach on the handlebars. And if you look at the degree of flex here of my knee, it's perfectly reasonable, and I have no problem pedaling this bike. Of course, this is further enhanced by the fact that it has a motor providing pedal assist. So this is a far more capable bike than the original. This is more than just a cool looking bike to nip to your local shops to buy a curly whirly and a packet of spangles. You can do far more with this bike. Now, I've been to a number of events here in the UK where we routinely ride 10 or 15 miles. And I enjoy those events all the more because I know at the end of that journey, I'm not going to feel any fatigue or discomfort. I hope you've enjoyed watching these videos, and maybe it's stimulated you to have a go at modifying your bikes. Thanks for watching. I'll see you around.